Good morning. Welcome to our discussion on principles of economics. And today we are going to discuss about cost of production. Cost of production. Now, why this cost of production is important to understand? As you know that in an economy we have many industries. Within each industry there are many firms producing different types of goods and services. For example, if you take Hyundai, who is producing a four-wheeler, and then at the other hand you see the Apple, who is producing Apple products, right? Tablets and then mobile iPhones and desktop computers, so on and so forth. Now, one thing is common irrespective of whatever is the product of a particular firm, each firm is trying to maximize profit, right. So, profit maximization is the common objective of all these firms irrespective of their nature of production, right. Now, profit maximization requires a company or a firm to understand what is the cost of production. Without knowing cost of production, we cannot really go for profit maximization, because profit is nothing but total revenue minus total cost. And cost also depends on what is the nature of your production or production function, right. So, that is why we are now interested to discuss a very important topic called cost of production. Now, if you think about the production, basically the first thing that comes to our mind, that what is the economist's role in production. So, production happens in a very simple diagram. If you think about, let us say there is a box and then you are giving input from this side and you are getting output from this side, and this box is a completely black box. Let us say this is a black box. So, with this simple diagram we can easily understand and differentiate economists' role in the domain of cost of production, particularly in production, from the role of a production engineer, right. So, a production engineer is basically interested to know what is happening in this particular black box, so that input is getting converted into output. Okay. So, an engineer's role is to understand the technical side of the production, how input is getting into output, whether we can improve the engineering efficiency of this particular technique where input gets converted to output. However, economist's role is quite different than a production engineer. Economist is not thinking about the technical side of it, what is happening to the black box. Rather, economist is observing only input and output and considering the technology as given. Okay. Then economists, they are trying to define production function as, how are they define production function? Production function is defined as the relationship between input and maximum attainable output given the technology. Please keep in mind what I am saying. Production function is a relationship between inputs and maximum attainable maximum, what is very important here, maximum attainable output given the technology. So, we can write this, let us say y is the output, y is a function of x, here y is output and x is input. Now, can you think of, when I write y is a function of x, y equals to f x, where is the technology here? So, this is the maximum output that I can get from a particular input x, or you can assume x is a vector of inputs consisting of capital, labor, material. For the time being, for simplicity's sake, we are assuming this output is producible from one particular input, which is labor. Okay. So, I can see easily the output, I can see easily the input, but the technology what I said earlier, that is not easily visible from this particular relationship. Okay. Please keep in mind that technology is given by this factor f. So, f is actually the technology here. What is technology then? You might be thinking that technology is a machine, but technology is much broader than that. The broader definition of technology is basically an art. Technology is nothing but an art. An art, what is that art? An art of converting input into output. Okay? There are different such arts depending on which specific technology you are using, which specific machinery you are using. So, it is an art of converting input into output. Right. So, economists' role is to understand whether we are getting the maximum output out of this given input and technology. So, we are not at all concerned about what is happening in this technology. So, economists will evaluate whether maximum output is attainable from a given technology and input bundle or not. If it is not, probably economists will suggest the production engineers, please go back and check what is happening to this black box, to your technology, if there is an improvement possible. Now, why is the economist interested to check whether maximum output is attainable or not? Because if you recall that in the context of market, we discussed that efficiency requires goods should be produced only by those producers who are cost effective. And how do you ensure cost effectiveness? If the producer is getting maximum output from the given input bundle and technology. That is why we are interested as economists, we are interested whether this output what is coming out of this black box is maximum or not, right. To understand whether it is maximum or not, we need to introduce certain concepts. So, please try to understand the concept. If output is denoted by, let us say, Q, this is output, and Q is again a function of, let us say, Q is a function of capital and labor, only two inputs. Then if you increase the capital or labor by some amount, then your output is also going to increase, and the increase in output, or rather a change in output for a unit change of your inputs, are denoted by marginal productivity of labor or capital. So, mathematically delta Q, delta L is MPL, which is known as marginal product of labor, and then delta Q by delta K, it is known as MPK, marginal product of capital. Very easy to understand. If we change labor by 1 unit, what is the change in your output? That is MPL. And if you change capital by 1 unit, what is the change in your output? That is known as marginal product of capital. So, MPL and MPK are marginal product of labor and marginal product of capital. Now, let us try to understand one important concept. Let us say a particular firm is given by some amount of capital and some amount of labor. Then there are different combination of capital and labor that can be used by a particular firm, and this particular curve denoting different combination of capital and labor that produces same amount of output is known as isoquant. This is known as isoquant. Okay. So, isoquant is also another concept, important concept that we are trying to understand. You might have heard about isotope, isotone, so on and so forth in your class 2 physics or chemistry. Now, iso means, what is the meaning of iso? Iso means same and quant means quantity. So, same amount of quantity, that is the meaning, same amount of quantity produced from different combination of capital and labor. So, along this isoquant we will get different combination. If you are on the upper side of the isoquant, you can see that means you are employing more capital, less of labor. As you move down the isoquant, you can see that you are basically substituting labor for capital. So, capital amount is going down and you are increasing the labor. Okay. But whatever you do along this, basically then different combination of capital and labor that a firm can use to get same amount of output. Which particular input combination that the firm will choose, that depends on, can you think of how will the firm decide about which particular input bundle, that means which particular capital and labor combination should be used for production, whether the firm should go for more capital and less labor or more labor less capital. How to determine? Of course, that depends on relative price of capital and labor, because firm wants to get the maximum output given the technology and inputs. So, firm wants to minimize cost. Okay. Firm has as we all know that any firm might be having a given amount of money, right. With that money the firm has to buy capital and labor. If that is the case, then firm will select that particular input bundle that is within the budget of the firm, and firm is trying to get more and more output. So, it all depends on relative price of capital and labor. We will come to that point. Before that, let us try to understand the slope of this particular isoquant and what is the economic interpretation of this. Let us say that to start with, the firm is at the point A, okay, and then the firm moves from A to B. There is a movement. Let us assume that if the firm moves from A to B, then there is a reduction in capital denoted by delta K. There is an increase in capital by delta L, right. Now, when there is a reduction in capital by delta K, what would be the reduction in output? Okay, that is the question. So, if the firm moves from A to B, capital reduces or reduced, capital is reduced by dk amount and labor is increased by delta L. Okay. Capital is reduced by delta K and labor is increased by delta L. So, that is what is happening. Now, the question is, this dk amount of reduction in capital will definitely lead to a reduction in output. What would be that reduction in output? If 1 unit of capital is reduced, then output is reduced by how much? The marginal product of capital, which is nothing but delta this delta Q by delta K, which is nothing but MPK. So, this is the loss in output due to reduction in capital by 1 unit. So, when your capital is reduced by delta K, so that means the total loss is minus MPK into delta K, that is the loss in output. So, this I can say that loss in output due to loss in capital. Then when you get extra labor by moving from A to B, so you are going to have more output, and what is the increase in output? MPL into DL. So, this is increase in output due to increase in labor. Okay. Let us take a summation of these two, that means MPL into DL plus, sorry, this is minus MPK into dk equals to how much? If I take the summation of these two changes, since you look at here, since we are moving along the isoquant, which is defined as same output, if we take the summation of these two, that will turn out to be 0. There won't be any change in output if we move along the isoquant. So, this is 0. So, that means from here what I can understand that MPK into dk equals to MPL into DL. That implies what is the slope? dk dl would be the slope. So, dk dl equals to then MPL by MPK. So, that means this is basically nothing but slope of the isoquant. So, slope of the isoquant basically measures the ratio of the two marginal product, that is all. MPL is the marginal product of labor, MPK is the marginal product of capital, and if I take a ratio of these two, that indicates the slope of the isoquant. Okay? That indicates the slope of the isoquant. Is that fine? Now, let us introduce another concept. Let us say that a firm is given a fixed amount of money given by C, and that amount of money the firm is spending on two inputs, capital and labor. So, C is the total money, the firm is having. Let us assume that W is the wage rate and R is basically rental for capital. Price of labor is given by W, price of capital is given by R. So, if the firm spends the entire amount of money C on these two inputs, labor and capital, then we can get an equation denoting C equals to W into L plus R into K. Okay? And this is basically a line which is known as iso-cost line. Iso-cost line. So, along this line you will have different combination of capital and labor, but the cost is same. So, the firm can actually buy different combination of capital and labor using the fixed amount of money given, which is C. Let us now try to formulate what is the firm's objective is then. So, the firm's objective is then basically objective is to maximize output, okay, which is basically a function of capital and labor. How? By choosing capital and labor. And what is the constraint that the firm is facing? The constraint is this: the total money is given as C, which is equals to W into L plus R into K. Okay. So, maximizing output with respect to this cost, C equals to W into L plus R into K, right. So, this is a constraint optimization problem that the firm is facing. Now, do you know how to optimize this? How to solve this problem so that we can get the optimum amount of capital K star and optimum amount of labor W star by optimizing this problem. Let us try to understand this optimization from a method called Lagrangian multiplier method.